Look, Stalker 2 has always been a special game. From the first second you step into the zone, you can feel that there's something unique there. The atmosphere, the open world, the feeling that every corner hides a different danger. Now, the Sealed Truths update has arrived, changing a lot of things. The zone is more alive, more dangerous, and more beautiful than ever. It's no exaggeration to say that this update truly transformed the game. There's a lot of new content here, and not everything is obvious right away. So I went deep, scouted every detail of this update, and brought you the 10 things you need to know before going back to the zone, or before entering it for the first time. I'm Matthew, and the video is about to start.
If the bandits figure out how to use the transmission, I'm done for.
GSC Game World doesn't release free content out of random generosity. Every move they make has a purpose within a larger plan, and Sealed Truths is no exception. This update doesn't exist just to return you to X18 for nostalgia, it exists to prepare you for what comes next. The Cost of Hope DLC, scheduled for the summer of 2026, is the next big chapter of Stalker 2, and what you discover in the lower levels of the lab is not an end, it's a beginning. The way GSC weaves this connection is exactly the kind of long-term narrative that the best games in the genre use to build genuine loyalty. You aren't pushed forward by an arrow on the minimap, you are pulled by curiosity. The elements of Sealed Truths that connect to Cost of Hope are there, but the game doesn't hand you this connection on a silver platter. You need to pay attention, collect documents, and process what you saw. And when the penny drops, the anticipation for the DLC stops being about new content and starts being about specific questions you need to see answered. This kind of narrative setup works because it respects the player's intelligence. GSC doesn't need a prepare for the next DLC screen. They built an entire questline that is satisfying and complete on its own, but also plants seeds that will only bloom when Cost of Hope arrives. It's the difference between disposable content and content that has weight within a larger universe. The zone has a memory, and what happened in X18 didn't stay buried by accident. What this means in practice is that playing Sealed Truths now isn't optional for those who want to be ready for Cost of Hope. It's practically mandatory. You'll enter the next DLC with context other players won't have, with formulated questions, and with a different relationship to the characters and places the game will introduce. GSC is building something bigger than a simple open world shooter. They are building a mythology. And Sealed Truths is the chapter you'll need to have read when the story finally shows where it's going. In the zone, rumor is currency. You learn early on that a whispered piece of information in the right place is worth more than any artifact you carry in your backpack. And that's exactly how the Sealed Truths questline begins. Not with an explosion, not with a dramatic cutscene, but with a name circulating among the stalkers of the slag heap, Diode, a technician. A guy who, for some reason no one can quite explain, supposedly gained access to the lower levels of X18, areas that had been sealed since the days of the experiments. What makes Diode work so well as a narrative starting point is precisely the ambiguity surrounding him. He isn't an obvious villain, he isn't a declared hero, he's a technician with too much information for someone in his position. And when Skiv decides to pull that thread, you feel that classic Stalker tension, the certainty that you're heading towards something that won't be simple, but the curiosity that keeps you from stopping. Diode might have gone in there out of necessity, greed, or something you'll only understand when you're already too deep to turn back. The slag heap as the location for this initial conversation is also no coincidence. It's an already heavy place, full of people who have survived longer than they should have, and who carry stories they'd rather not tell. Diode fits perfectly into this environment. He's the kind of character GSC knows how to create, the one who seems like a background extra until the moment you realize the entire plot passed through him. And the way the investigation unfolds, going from the conversation with him directly into the depths of X18, transforms a simple rumor into something much larger. What GSC did here was use an apparently minor NPC as a trigger for one of the most narratively dense explorations Stalker 2 has ever offered. Diode isn't just a quest giver, he is the excuse the game needed to push you back inside that laboratory. And when you finally descend into the lower levels of X18 because of this investigation, you realize the rumors about him were just the surface. What's down there is what the zone guarded most carefully. and she doesn't guard things by accident. If you played the original Stalker, X18 already lives in your head as a nightmare you never asked for. That place was always heavy, disturbing, the kind of location that makes you want to run away and keep exploring at the same time. And now, with the Sealed Truths update, patch 1.9 for Stalker 2, GSC Game World has reopened exactly what was sealed in the base game. The lower levels of X18, those areas you looked at during the main campaign and felt there was something hidden behind those closed doors. The mission begins when you talk to Diode, a technician at the slag heap, who somehow gained access to these deep sections of the lab. The deal seems simple. You go in, recover what he needs, and leave with a fair payment. But any veteran of the zone knows that nothing there is simple. GSC made it clear that the developers added more intense horror elements to reinforce the atmosphere of a place where sinister experiments happened, and where clearly nothing has improved since. What really catches my attention is that the base game already left X18 partially accessible through the first 2 floors, but the lower levels were completely blocked. This means Sealed Truths isn't creating something from scratch. It's opening a space that GSC deliberately saved. And when a developer saves something, it's usually because what's in there is worth the wait. The official description mentions something much more significant beyond the loot and lost knowledge you might find. And the timing of this is no coincidence. This update was released alongside the announcement of the Cost of Hope DLC, scheduled for the summer of 2026, and apparently there are already hints of what's to come hidden in the new questline. So X18 isn't just fan service for those who love Shadow of Chernobyl. It might be the gateway to the zone's next big story. It's worth going in, it's worth exploring every dark corner, just don't expect to come out the same way you entered. One of the things that has always set Stalker apart from other open-world shooters is the way it tells stories without needing to scream in your face. The zone speaks for itself. Through letters scattered on the floor, recordings in abandoned PDAs, and environments that tell more than any cutscene ever could. And with the Sealed Truths update, GSC Game World went exactly in that direction. A full, narrative-focused questline built upon the secrets that the zone's underground laboratories have kept for decades. You don't enter X18 just to grab loot and leave. The mission puts you at the center of a real investigation where every room, every document, and every environmental detail exists to tell you what happened down there. GSC didn't just throw random NPCs on the map and call it a story. They built a narrative line that leans precisely on the elements that made the original Stalker so iconic. The weight of the unknown, the feeling that you are discovering something that shouldn't exist. What impresses me about this approach is that the questline doesn't feel like disposable content tossed in to keep the game relevant. It deepens the mysteries of the zone in a way that connects the dark past of the laboratories with your character's present. Every step forward reveals a new layer, and the atmosphere built into the lower levels of X18 makes this discovery process genuinely uncomfortable. In the good way, the kind that keeps you pinned to your chair even when you're afraid of what's coming next. And perhaps the most important detail of this questline is what it represents for the game's future. There are indications that the secrets unlocked here have a direct connection to the Cost of Hope DLC, which is scheduled for the summer of 2026. This means Sealed Truths isn't just an isolated story, it's a setup, a piece of the larger puzzle that GSC is assembling. Playing now means getting there first. And in the zone, knowing what others don't has always been the difference between surviving and becoming just another forgotten body in a sealed lab. Stalker has always been a game that charges you for what you want. You don't enter a dangerous area and come out unscathed just because you played well. The zone decides when you deserve to pass and when you become another body added to the list. Sealed Truths maintains exactly this philosophy in the new X18 incursions. The lower levels weren't unlocked to give you a peaceful stroll. They were open to test you, and what you find down there depends directly on how much risk you are willing to accept. The high-risk, high-reward structure isn't just a marketing label. It's the core of how these missions were designed. Valuable equipment, lost knowledge about the X18 experiments, and something GSC itself describes as more significant, are scattered through those depths. But all of this comes with encounters that the developer clearly built to eliminate players who arrive unprepared or impatient. You can try to run in, and it might even work. But the zone usually collects on that arrogance later. What makes this approach especially clever is that it respects different playstyles without sacrificing tension. A more cautious player will explore every corner, collect documents, and understand what happened there before grabbing anything. A more aggressive player will go straight for the objectives and pay the price in ammo, health, and resources. Both will come out with different rewards, and both will come out with stories to tell. This balance is exactly what makes Stalker Stalker. And when GSC talks about something more significant beyond conventional loot, it's impossible not to be curious about what that means. Within the larger context of the game, it could be narrative information that connects to the Cost of Hope DLC. It could be an item that changes how you understand the zone. It could be something you'll only recognize as important after additional hours of gameplay. But it's exactly this kind of reward, the kind that goes beyond the inventory, that justifies every risk X18 makes you take. The zone gives nothing for free, and what she guards most carefully is usually worth every scar. There's a difference between a game that scares you and a game that disturbs you. A scare is easy, a loud sound, an enemy jumping out of the dark, a well-placed jump scare. Disturbance is something else. It's that feeling that lingers after you've turned off the game, when you're still thinking about what you saw, trying to process what that place means. The X18 of Sealed Truths was built to disturb you, not just scare you. And GSC was explicit about this. The focus here is on places of horrific experiments, and every environmental detail exists to remind you that human beings made monstrous choices in that laboratory. The deadly anomalies and mutants inhabiting the lower levels of X18 aren't just obstacles thrown on the map out of gameplay obligation, they are consequences. What you find down there is the direct result of what was done in that place. Experiments that spiraled out of control, science that crossed lines that should never have been crossed. And when the game puts you in front of these creatures, the feeling isn't one of fighting a generic enemy, it's one of facing concrete proof that something went profoundly irreversibly wrong there. What elevates the psychological horror of this area is the way the environment works in tandem with the encounters. Stalker has always been a master at creating environments that speak, and the lower levels of X18 were designed to tell stories without needing dialogue. Every room has a function you need to deduce. Every piece of abandoned equipment suggests a procedure you'd rather not imagine. The sinister atmosphere isn't the result of a single element, but of how everything there fits into a narrative that the game never fully verbalizes. And precisely because of that, it's scarier. GSC made a brave decision to bet on psychological horror as the main highlight of Sealed Truths, at a time when most AAA game updates move toward more action and more explosions. They went the opposite way. More silence, more weight, more discomfort. And this is the kind of content that separates Stalker from any other open world shooter on the market. Any game can kill you. Few can make you feel like it would have been better if you'd never even entered. There is a moment in any long Stalker 2 campaign where you start to notice something is wrong. Not wrong in a narrative or lore sense, wrong in the sense that the world is reacting in a way that breaks immersion. Too many mutants appear in places that should be relatively safe. The zone stops feeling like a brutal but coherent ecosystem and starts feeling like an illogical enemy generator. This was exactly the problem Sealed Truths corrected, a bug that caused excessive spawning of strong mutant types during long campaigns, and anyone who's played a lot surely felt this. The impact of this kind of bug goes beyond artificial difficulty. When powerful mutants breed uncontrollably, the economic balance of the entire game suffers. You spend ammo, medkits, and resources at a rate the game wasn't designed to sustain, and the result is a campaign that becomes progressively more punishing, not by design, but by error. GSC identified this and was surgical in the fix. The goal wasn't to make the game easier, it was to return it to the difficulty that was planned from the start. What makes this fix especially relevant is the timing. Sealed Truths introduces dense new areas and high-risk encounters in X18, and having mutants overspawning during these missions would transform a challenging and calculated experience into a simply unfair one. By resolving the bug before releasing the new content, GSC ensured that players will face the laboratory under the right conditions, with the tension the game wants you to feel, not the chaos that a broken system would create. And this kind of attention to balance says a lot about how GSC is treating Stalker 2 post-launch. They could have released the new questline without addressing existing problems, betting that the new content would cover the old flaws. They didn't do that. Every update has arrived with structural fixes alongside the new features. And this shows the developer understands that an open world only works when its internal rules make sense. The zone needs to be cruel by nature, not by bug. There is a type of bug that is worse than crashing the game or dropping the frame rate. It's the kind that silently breaks the narrative without warning or explanation. You're playing, advancing the campaign, and suddenly a mission simply disappears from your log. That was exactly what happened with Dark as a Dungeon in Stalker 2. If you had already passed the main campaign's point of no return, the mission was automatically canceled the moment you tried to start it. No cutscene, no dialogue, no conclusion. The technical problem behind this was a failure in the mission state verification logic. The game checked the player's progression at the wrong moment and concluded that the quest was incompatible with that stage of the campaign, when, in fact, it should remain available regardless of where you were in the main story. This kind of error disproportionately affects the most dedicated players, those who advance quickly and explore the campaign with intensity, precisely the audience that least deserve to be penalized for it. The Sealed Truths fix resolves the mission activation logic, ensuring that Dark as a Dungeon remains accessible even after the point of no return. It's a small technical code change, but the impact on the experience is significant. Stalker 2 has an open world structure where story progress and side quests need to coexist coherently. When a mission is canceled due to a verification error, you lose not only the content, but the feeling that the world responds to your choices fairly. What GSC demonstrates by fixing this kind of bug in a content update is that they aren't just layering new things over old problems. They are cleaning the foundation while they build. The zone of Stalker 2 is a place that demands you trust it, that the world's rules work, that missions exist to be completed, that your progress means something. Every fix of this type is one more brick in that trust. And in a game that asks for so many hours of investment, trust isn't a detail, it's everything. The loading screen is one of those things most players ignore completely. You click continue, look at your phone, and come back in time to see the bar reach 100% and move on. But there is a school of design that understands this moment as an opportunity, a short window where the game can put you in the right headspace before you take control. GSC Game World clearly thinks this way. And with Sealed Truths, they updated the loading screens with new images that directly reflect the atmosphere of Laboratory X18. The decision to create specific art for X18 isn't cosmetic. It's when the image that appears while the game loads already carries the visual weight of that laboratory. The cold lighting, the sealed corridors, the feeling of something preserved that should have been destroyed. You arrive in the game with the right tone. It's a psychological transition between the real world and the zone, and whoever designed these screens understood that the experience begins before the controller vibrates in your hand. This level of attention to detail is what separates teams that make games from teams that build worlds. Any studio can reuse old art on the loading screens of a new update. GSC chose to create specific visual content for X18, ensuring that even those seconds of waiting are aligned with the thematic content that Sealed Truths brings. It's a commitment to the game's aesthetic coherence that goes far beyond what the player will consciously notice, but they will feel it. And in the end, it's exactly these invisible details that make a game feel alive. No one is going to open Twitter to talk about the new loading screens. No review is going to give an entire paragraph to it, but when everything in the game, even the moment when it's technically still loading, is working to keep you within the zone's atmosphere, the result is an experience that embraces you in a way you can't explain. Stalker 2 knows what it is. And even the wait screens remind you of that. Stalker 2 is not the kind of game that holds your hand. It never was, and GSC's decision to make the new Sealed Truths questline available only during a specific window of the campaign, after Hot on the Trail, and before a minor incident, is completely coherent with the game's philosophy. The zone has its own rhythm, and if you don't pay attention, it moves on without waiting for you. Losing content because you didn't play it at the right time isn't punishment, it's a consequence, and Stalker has always known the difference between the two. The choice of this specific window wasn't random. This segment of the campaign represents a balance point, where the player already has enough maturity to handle what X18 offers, but hasn't advanced far enough that the world's circumstances change to the point of making the mission narratively incoherent. GSC positioned the questline exactly where it makes the most sense within the story, transforming the limited availability into an intentional design element rather than an arbitrary restriction. This kind of decision also encourages something open-world games often lose: an awareness of the moment you are in. In many games, side quests exist in a vacuum parallel to the main story, with no real connection to what is happening. By tying the new questline to a specific period of the campaign, GSC forces the player to pay attention to narrative progression, to understand where they are within the larger story. The mission isn't a detour from the campaign, it is part of it. And for those reading this before reaching that point in the game, the message is simple. When Hot on the Trail appears in your log, don't just rush forward. Stop, go to the slag heap, talk to Diode. X18 will be waiting for you at that specific moment, and that's exactly when the experience was designed to work. The zone closes doors all the time, but sometimes it warns you beforehand. This is one of the few times it's giving you the chance to choose to enter before the door closes for good.